since we reached to the final week to culminate Cartoon Crisis, it's a better way to actually do one crossover between two cartoons that I used to enjoy while not enjoy that much. And I'm talking about the Grim Adventures of the KND. I'm just going to get this out of the way. I do not enjoy the Grim Adventures of Billy and Manny anymore. I mean, for what it is, I did have plans on reviewing The Wrath of Spider Cream as part of my October schedule, but the more I think about it, I honestly think that this show doesn't really deserve my critiquing whatsoever. Mainly the fact that most of the characters got flanderized, and that even though that there were some characters that I did enjoy, and I'm talking about Grimm, I honestly think that everything in this show is just really forced. You may say that I only watch the Oreo episodes, but you may say that I haven't watched this show that much, but at the same time, I've watched the other episodes from this show, Oreo, and after hearing reviews and opinions from other characters, from other users about this show, on how the characters got flanderized, yeah. And the idea of having this show, having a crossover with the KND, the Kids Next Door, I honestly think that it was probably a bad mistake. Believe me, out of all the cartoons that the KND should have a better crossover with, they end up with this. The episode begins with Billy completely acting like a joke by playing golf in the house by using Grimm's Stife, and Billy's dad completely told Billy to not touch his lucky pants, which is his golf pants. But Billy decides to put on his pants no matter what. I understand that Billy is extremely stupid, but in the earlier seasons, he wasn't like this. This flannelization is just pressuring to the point that it just really becomes a theme throughout my reviews of any of these cartoons. Look, I understand that flannelization is something that writers have to do in order to have a show keep going, but when you have a character this stupid to actually do this kind of stuff by playing golf in the house and also wearing his lucky pants, also wearing his father's lucky pants that he told specifically to not wear, that is, well, I actually think that Billy is completely out of his mind. So Billy made a call that he wants some help by other cartoon characters, and this is the only part we actually get to see Ed and Eddie, and Eddie completely told Billy to call Kids Next Door. This leads to probably one of the best intros when it comes to crossovers, but that is not saying much. It is unique, but at the same time, do not be fooled by the awesome intro from this, because this episode is a full of lies. I'm just gonna get this out of the way. I honestly think that having the Kids Next Door being in the same world in the Grim Adventures of Bill and Manny honestly does not work. Look, I get that they're both in 2D animation, but when you look at the image of number 1 and 5 in a living room that is Billy's house, it's honestly it just doesn't suit whatsoever. It's mainly the fact that, for one, they really just had to actually do what they could in order to make this crossover work, and not only that, we're only almost 3 minutes into the special, and we only got the crossover begin with by one of the lamest ways possible. The reason why the KMD is in this special is because they need to get Billy out of his father's pants. That's it. That's the entire plot. It isn't a serious situation that Billy is dealing with one of the villains from the KND. Not any adult experiment. It's just getting him out of the pants. And that's it. I have nothing to actually discuss. This is the biggest problem with this crossover, and it's the fact that they want you to take this plot seriously, but at the same time with the flannelization and the fact that the KND just doesn't walk in the world of the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy is honestly hard to actually see, to actually enjoy. Let me put this in perspective. If this was something that can actually work with a different cartoon, then I honestly think it can work with the interactions. The interactions with Billy and the kids from Kids Next Door isn't really redeemable or really good to watch. For any diehard fan who enjoyed these two shows, maybe, but when you look at it, when you completely look at the characters of how they're portrayed, you can really tell that this episode really doesn't even have any kind of development or any kind of focus whatsoever. Because when the kids decide to take Billy away in order to get him out of the pants while also doing another mission in order to stop the delightful children from down the lane, number one has to stay here in order to pretend to be like Billy, and that's the disguise that he's wearing. That is the face of what number one is making, is basically my expression of this entire crossover. And then when we completely see Mandy be part of this, we get to see the worst part. Mandy is a ruthless character, and the finalization in her has way over the limit. Other than slapping number one multiple times, he completely decides to take matters into her own hands by trying to actually expose the truth from number one on where Billy is. That's pretty much the only thing that Mandy did good, is trying to figure out where Billy is, but you haven't even seen what her main role is in this crossover. Back with the other characters, Billy is just causing trouble while annoying the other characters, and number 362 said that the delightful children from down the lane is making a machine that can allow him to completely take over the entire world by being extremely big and stuff like that. I honestly think that this is the type of plot that actually kind of works when it comes to the delightful children's interactions with the main characters from Codename Kids Next Door characters, but with the Grim Adventures of Billy and Andy characters in this, it just doesn't work. Anyway, other than that, when we getting back to Mandy, you can really tell that after everything that she's done, she finally got the truth off of number one, that Billy is with his friends, which leads to Mandy taking matters into his own hands. Believe me, this is where the special goes downhill. And then Grim actually sees number one, and just like Mandy, he tortures him too. This is basically number one getting tortured. If this is mainly for laughs, it would kind of work if it actually happened with the other characters from Billy and Mandy, from the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, but with a character that is from a different show, it just doesn't work, especially of how forced it is. Anyway, when Billy had to go to the bathroom, he goes into that machine, and with the scythe, along with the delightful children from down the lane, they get fused. They get fused together to become the delightful Weeble. In all honesty, this is pretty much the most creative thing, except that you need Grim's scythe in order to make it all work. I'm sorry, but this is honestly really depressing that this ideal, one of the biggest ideals that they have is having the scythe be some kind of a focus on the delightful children's invention. So whenever I actually see this, it's honestly sad to know that this is literally the only way for any of this stuff to happen in order to have some kind of conflict in this crossover. So anyway, getting back to number one and Grim. Number one Grim is completely shocked that his scythe is completely gone. And he really needs it back, otherwise things will get a lot more complicated. And then number one decides to take Grim with them, since that he's literally the only character that he can actually get help with. So, getting back to the other characters, we get to see that Mandy, despite the fact that she isn't in the disguise, everyone is convinced that that's number one. You know what? For all the times I've actually seen episodes like this where they tried to do something stupid, this is by far one of the dumbest story plots I've ever seen from any other cartoon. I honestly think that out of all the characters besides number one, can actually see Mandy in number one's clothes, despite the fact that she has hair, and the fact that the other characters are just going to accept the fact that that's number one, is honestly a huge plot hole that really damages the entire special. Not because of the fact that they're stupid, but the fact that Mandy is just taking advantage after everything that she's doing. I get that she isn't like this in the earlier seasons, but the flannelization that she has in this is honestly that she doesn't care about anything. She tortures Grim constantly, and she's just, when there's an opportunity, just in the open, she just does it with no motivation. Seriously. And when you see the other characters from Kids Next Door completely preventing number one on just trying to stop this whole situation, that is where you actually get to see that everything in the special is just ruined, and we're only halfway into the special. With the other characters completely being Mandy's servants, it's honestly pretty much way more lazy and honestly forced. Like I said, this crossover tried so hard to actually be really entertaining and also really great to have a crossover on Cartoon Network, but the way it's executed is that, unlike the Jimmy and Timmy Power Hours, they did not make the characters this stupid and really flanderized. But in this special, when the characters from the Kids Next Door are taking the virus from the characters from Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, you know something is wrong. And I've heard that, and I know this because they actually use the word virus in this episode. I'm not making this up. The more I watch these episodes and the fact that the coronavirus is still going on, it really goes to show that these episodes and cartoons are really ahead of their time. Anyone with bits of seeing secondary characters or background characters completely interacting with other characters may be a good thing, but it still doesn't make this work. Besides, the only here so that the Delightful Reaper can actually get more people so they can take over the world. Getting back to number one in Grimm, they decide to get back to the moon base that turned into that. I've already expressed my opinions on Mandy in this episode. Let's just keep going. When they completely meet Mandy in this, Mandy still doesn't care about who Grimm and number one whatsoever. Seriously. Does anyone ever actually think that this was a good idea to begin with by having a crossover of the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy and the Codename Kids Next Door have a crossover? Especially since this is 2 months before Kids Next Door came to an end, while Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy continuing on for about a year or two. I honestly think that this crossover honestly is basically a group of decisions, a plot, so many decisions that there were originally going to be planned, but they didn't know how to make this crossover work, so they had to actually combine their ideas together, except that they didn't know that flannelization is a bad thing, and completely missing the point onto how this crossover doesn't work. The only good parts I have to say about this is that Grimm isn't flanderized completely. And number one, despite getting tortured, I like his interactions with Gwen, but I'm gonna get to that later. So anyway, with them being in the prison cell, they need to think of a way to stop Mandy and the Delightful Weeple from causing havoc. So Gwen gives number one that bone thing that you saw earlier in the episode, and with it, it causes some dangerous magical powers. And that's pretty much the best thing, and this leads to one of my favorite bits of this crossover, but we're gonna get to that soon. Meanwhile, back to Earth, the Delightful Weeple, now being shaped as Gwen, is causing havoc while having Billy being a annoying doofus. Billy is really nothing more than a plot device, and he's really not hilarious. He's so annoying and hard to take it seriously. At this point, he's really like Sheen from Planet Sheen, and I honestly think that his finalization could be either worse than Sheen. At least Sheen isn't really stupid and this dumbfounded when it comes to Billy just being a sociopath or a psychopath and just shouts because it's funny. Forced shouting just makes Billy more like a retard than anything else. Anyway, when Mandy completely comes in with a bot, well, it actually has a sequence, which is actually kind of cool, but that's not saying much. They want to stop the Delightful Weeple from causing havoc. All the while, Glim and number one, in this amazing shield and sword thing. I know this is not a Link from Zelda reference, I know that for sure. But at the same time, it's actually probably my favorite part of this entire crossover, seeing Glim and number one actually fusing each other with the bond that they have and actually stopping the Delightful Weeple from causing havoc. And they think that Mandy is on their side, but you're probably going to be really disgusted what Mandy does soon. So anyway, after somewhat of an entertaining battle between the Delightful Weeple and Glim and number one, this leads to kind of humorous moments of having the Delightful Weeple hitting Glim multiple times because Glim is a shield. But that didn't last long, as we actually see the biggest problem with Mandy's derailment as a character. And the whole bits of the lucky pants that the Delightful Weeple is wearing with the butt jokes is honestly getting overused at this point. I honestly forgot that Cartoon Network has a habit of having butt humor in those shows. And I know I didn't mention that in my gym partner's a monkey review, but at the same time, I really didn't want to talk about that because it was so stupid and painful. So when Glim actually found out a way that it was his lucky pants, that the lucky pants is what caused his life for Weeple, that caused him to be invisible, the only way to actually stop his life for Weeple is to pull down his pants, basically. But then we reach to, and I keep delaying it for way too long, is the flannelization from Andy. He allows the Delightful Weeple to chop him off, allowing Mandy to be part of the Delightful Weeple, and it leads to a very powerful fuse, much more powerful than the previous form. You see why Mandy's finalization is really terrible? Seriously, what is it with these cartoons using finalization for these types of seasons that they're gonna keep going? Seriously, I can understand having a difficult time on trying to figure out some other way to entertain the audience, but flannelization is the last thing that we should do with these characters. And believe me, the battle between Mandy, and as I do call him Mandy, against Glim and number one is short-lived, since that Billy's dad, after doing some workout, is so upset that his lucky pants has been taken, so that he immediately pulled them down, which allowed number one and Glim to take the final blow on the wheel. Yeah, the wheel. Anyway, they went victorious. everything is back to normal, except that Mandy escapes. And the difference is that there's no sequel. And the quote that Glim says on trying to be in the same show, and when the bit, well, Milm 1 says that girl has some issues, and then when Glim says trying to be at the same show, it's a good book, it's a good fourth wall breaker, but when it comes to Mandy's finalization, it just isn't enough. Do you want to know why I decided to review this episode, except for the fact that it's mainly a crossover that is done wrong? Well, this could have some kind of potential, because by this point, Cartoon Network, other than Out Jimmy's Head, were pretty on a good run despite of all the issues that they're having with the finalization. When it comes to some of the cartoons, Codename Kids Next Door, despite coming to an end for the next months after this episode's release, was really the only good show that Cartoon Network had produced during that time. NNA came to an end. Most of the cartoons were not that entertaining to watch, and not only that, I honestly think that this entire crossover's existence is the sole purpose is to have multiple crossovers with other cartoons. Like I mentioned, NNA at the beginning, despite the fact that it's just mostly forced. It is funny, but at the same time, you just really question that every other cartoon that is published in Cartoon Network is part of the Cartoon Network universe. I get it. Cartoon Network can also produce cartoons in those studios. It's really obvious that they can handle making cartoons instead of just taking cartoons from other companies like Shadow Showdown. But when you completely look at this as a whole and how they can do whatever they want, it really makes this crossover really meaningless and forced. The bit where we actually get to see other characters from other shows, from Dexter's Laboratory, Mac from Foster's, Blossom from the Powerpuff Girls, I will admit it was probably great to actually see them as a cameo appearance and an Easter egg, but it does not excuse this episode's or crossover's existence, because it honestly feels like they try way too hard to make this an ultimate crossover. But if they're going to do a scene involving the other characters from other cartoons popping out of the delightful repo, they should probably do a massive crossover. I know that's way too over-exaggerating and way too forced, but in the end credits of this special, we get to see posters of characters appear in other cartoons, mainly from Cap Lazlo, the Class of 3000, My Jim Partner's a Monkey, or Manic, the crossover of Dexter's Laboratory, Samurai Jack, Samurai Mac, which is Foster's. It's honestly hard to actually look at this whenever you actually look at these in a full perspective. Seriously, do you really think that this is the type of stuff that actually kind of works for fan art or something like that? When you're one, this was great, but at the same time, this is basically Cartoon Network's desperation on just trying to do a crossover to have the network be somewhat relevant. Because after this, they've been starting to do CN Real, which made so much changes, despite the fact that it didn't last for long. I know it was Disney Channel sitcoms and Nickelodeon sitcoms that caused them to do live action, but at the same time, if they're going to actually do a crossover to get this much attention, they really actually need to put some kind of effort into this. This entire crossover involving the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy and the Codename Kids Next Door could have had potential, except for the fact that it's done for one of the wrong reasons. They made the characters from Billy and Mandy Flanderized minus Grim, and they really didn't give the main characters from Kids Next Door much of a purpose in this other than being dumb as a brick. Seriously. Other than having number 3 appear in one of the episodes in the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, this was literally nothing more than just trying way too hard to make this crossover work, but at the same time, it ends up becoming way more stupider than great. I mean, the only good things I actually like about this is the team up of Grim and number 1. Mainly the fact that they're actually not Flanderized. And I think that out of the crazy potential that when it comes to this crossover, the interactions of number 1 and Grim is pretty much the best. Now for me personally, I don't have much of a opinion on Grim when it comes to his appearance in Billy and Mandy, but watching him, I honestly think that he was much more better, and the fact that he's actually taking something seriously and he's actually a good person. Okay, he's not an entirely good person, I get that. He lost to a game against Billy and Mandy from the first episode, but in this, he was actually being helpful and just trying to stop Mandy. And the fact that Mandy got away with it is honestly difficult to actually understandable to see the situation that Grim is dealing with. Vandalized characters with any kind of direction whatsoever, with a show that's been going on way longer with more seasons on the way. And I gotta say, I honestly think that this show will be better off if this crossover never happened. Because believe me, this crossover could have been much more better if Mandy wasn't like this 100%. It's honestly difficult to actually take her seriously. And even with some of the appearances that I've seen from other cartoons, from the other episodes from Billy and Mandy, I honestly think that she would have been much more better instead of just being a ruthless jerk with no motivation whatsoever. She's even worse than Sam Puckett from iCarly and Sam and Cat. And I am not exaggerating. At least Sam actually has some kind of intelligence, and not much of a selfish jerk. Well, in iCarly, that is. Anyway, I really got nothing else to say. I completely expressed everything I need to address in this crossover alone. And this is one of the reasons until why this is the only crossover I'm reviewing from in Cartoon Crisis. As far as I'm concerned, the ending where we see Billy just blaming number 1, which by the way, everyone mistakes number 1 as Billy for some reason. Well, not Willie, but Billy's dad completely mistakes number 1 as Billy just by the fact that he doesn't care. Really makes this ending a lot more lazier, especially when Billy tries to be like number 1. Which caused people throwing stuff at him, which is pretty much the only funny part of this whole thing, is that they actually take it seriously for real. Overall, this crossover was a mess, and I think that I'm really dragging out this video much more longer. Especially that I don't have one music going on in the background that is probably getting irritating the more you hear it. I give this crossover, The Grim Adventures of the KND, 2 out of 10. It's honestly one of the worst crossovers I've ever seen. Cartoon Network could have done much more better than this, except they had to do it in the most rushed way possible, with franchise characters, and characters taking the virus from the other cartoon. It's stupid, but it's true.